If I have to become her to atone for my mistakes, then tear my skin apart.
The first thing I remember is the silence, not the gentle, pastoral quiet of a world at peace, but the dead, suffocating silence of a tomb. My tomb. A decommissioned comms relay station in the middle of the Arizona desert, where the only sounds were the whisper of sand against derelict satellite dishes and the clink of a whiskey bottle against the rim of my glass. I had turned this place into a mausoleum for my own ghost, a monument to failure built from blueprints and bourbon. On the walls, pinned over peeling paint and rust stains, were the schematics for Locke Station, my masterpiece, my magnum opus, my mass grave. The orbital platform had suffered a catastrophic cascade failure during its final burn into Martian orbit, a miscalculation in the thermal shielding my miscalculation. Hundreds of souls, the best and brightest of a generation, atomized in a flash of brilliant, soundless light. The guilt was a physical weight, a shroud I pulled tighter around myself with every swallow of cheap liquor. I was John Corbin, the boy genius who flew too close to the sun and took everyone with him. The silence was shattered by the crunch of tires on gravel. No one ever came out here. The access road was a line on a map that even the vultures ignored. I grabbed the half-empty bottle, my knuckles white, and stumbled to the blast-shielded window. A sleek, black corporate transport, shimmering in the heat haze, sat idling. Its lines were too clean, its presence too sterile for this graveyard of ambition. The door hissed open, and a woman stepped out. She moved with a purpose that felt alien in my world of aimless drifting, even from a distance. I could see the severe cut of her suit, the way her hair was pulled back into a knot that defied the desert wind. She was an antibody, drawn to the infection that was me. Her name was Dr. Helen Frost, and she brought the chill of her name into the sweltering heat of my lab. She didn't knock. The lock on my door was a formality I'd long since abandoned. She entered, her sharp heels clicking on the stained concrete, a sound like a clock ticking down to an execution. "John Corbin," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was like polished chrome smooth, cold, and reflective. She surveyed the chaos of my existence, the scattered blueprints, the empty ration packs, the graveyard of bottles with an expression of detached clinical interest. Viridian Dynamics has been looking for you. To serve the papers, I slurred, gesturing vaguely with the bottle. "Leave them on the pile." "We're not here to sue you." "Mr. Corbin," she said, her eyes never leaving mine. "We're here to offer you a resurrection." I laughed, a dry, rattling sound that turned into a cough. "I'm not in the market for salvation." "This isn't about your soul," she retorted, placing a sleek data slate on the only clear surface, a dusty workbench. "It's about your mind, your talent, the talent that designed Locke Station." Her words were a knife twisting in a wound that would never heal. "That talent is what killed them. That talent is what makes you the only candidate," she said, her voice dropping, becoming conspiratorial. She tapped the slate, and a holographic image flickered to life above it. A woman. Her name was Dr. Jade Vance, the architect of Mars, the high steward of the Valles Marineris colony, the public face of Viridian's terraforming project. I knew her. Of course. Every engineer knew her. She was everything I was supposed to be before I became this. She stood against a backdrop of the Martian sunset, the famous red horizon framing her silhouette. Her copper eyes held a gaze that was both commanding and weary, her posture exuding a confidence that bordered on arrogance. I'd always hated her for it. Hated her for succeeding where I had failed, for building a city on the planet I had only managed to scar with debris. "She's missing," Helen stated flatly. "Presumed dead. A shuttle accident over the polar ice caps. No survivors, no wreckage found." "Tragic," I said, my voice dripping with a sarcasm I didn't entirely feel. Looking at her image, at the sheer force of will captured in that single frame, I felt a confusing mix of emotions: my old professional disdain, a bitter jealousy, and something else, a strange, unwelcome pull, an attraction to the power she represented. Her death would destabilize the entire Martian project. Helen continued, ignoring my tone. It would set us back decades. Panic the investors. Project Pangu. The core of the terraforming initiative requires her biometric and neurological signature to proceed. She is the key. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the stuffy air. Viridian can't afford for her to be dead. And you, Mr. Corbin, can't afford to remain yourself. She slid a second file across the slate. A contract. We're offering you a chance to wipe the slate clean. The Lock Station disaster will be officially attributed to solar flare interference. Your name will be cleared, your reputation restored. All charges, all lawsuits, gone. I stared at her, the fog of alcohol beginning to recede in the face of sheer, cold insanity. In exchange for what? Helen's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. It was the expression of a scientist observing a successful, albeit unpleasant, experiment. You will undergo a full biological conversion. We will rebuild you, from the cellular level up, into a perfect replica of Dr. Jade Vance. We will imprint her memories, her reflexes, her knowledge on top of your own. You won't be playing a role. Mr. Corbin, you won't be impersonating her. Her voice was a chilling whisper. You will be her. The room spun. The proposal was monstrous, a violation of every natural and ethical law I could comprehend. They wanted to erase me, to wear my mind like a suit, placed inside a body that wasn't my own, to puppet a dead woman for the sake of corporate interests. I should have thrown her out. I should have smashed the slate and the bottle and screamed until my lungs gave out. But I didn't. Instead, my gaze drifted back to the hologram, to Jade Vance, standing defiant against the Martian sunset, to become her. It was an act of supreme self-destruction, an annihilation of John Corbin, and in that moment, in the depths of my self-loathing, the idea wasn't terrifying, it was seductive. It was a form of penance, a way to finally pay for the lives I had destroyed, if I couldn't bring them back. Perhaps I could become someone who could build the future they were supposed to have. Helen's non-smile widened infinitesimally, a wise decision. She pushed the digital stylus towards me. I picked it up. My hand, calloused and scarred from years of working with machinery, trembled as I held it over the glowing signature line. I looked at my fingers, thick and blunt, and tried to imagine them becoming long, slender, graceful. A woman's hands. Her hands. The thought sent a shiver through me that was equal parts horror and a dark, thrilling curiosity. I signed the contract. The light from the slate reflected on my face, illuminating the hollows of my eyes, the stubble on my jaw. It was the face of a man signing his own death warrant. The face of a man about to be born. My body was no longer my own. Every strand of hair, every breath, was a betrayal of who I used to be. The journey to Mars aboard the Ares 9 was not a passage of wonder and discovery. It was an incubation. I was cargo, a chrysalis sealed within a sterile medical bay, the sole passenger on a ghost ship crewed by automated systems. The trip, I was told, would take 9 months. Is a painfully ironic gestation period for the thing I was to become. My only human contact was Emma, Dr. Eris, officially. But she insisted on Emma. She was my physician, my supervisor, my jailer. Her voice was gentle, a soft counterpoint to the clinical hum of the ship, but her eyes were relentlessly observant. They were the eyes of a biologist studying a specimen, cataloging every change with a detached professionalism that was more unnerving than any open cruelty. The process will be uncomfortable. John. She told me during our first session, her face a calm mask on the monitor in my pod. We are essentially asking your body to fight its own nature. There will be pain. She wasn't lying. The transformation began with a fire in my veins. The first hormonal cocktail felt like liquid lava being pumped through my system. My body rebelled with fevers that left me shivering in pools of sweat, with aches that felt like my bones were being ground to dust. I was a battleground, and John Corbin was losing territory every single day. The physical changes were insidious at first, then terrifyingly rapid. I watched, helpless, as my muscle mass seemed to melt away, the strength I'd taken for granted, the solid bulk of my shoulders and chest, softened and shrank. It felt like a hollowing out, a gradual erasure of my physical presence in the world. My skin, weathered and rough from years in the desert sun, began to grow softer, more sensitive. A simple brush against the bedsheets became a noticeable sensation. Emma would run her diagnostics daily, her voice a calm litany of medical jargon as she monitored the cellular deconstruction and reconstruction. Estrogen and progesterone levels are stabilizing. Cellular mitosis is accelerating in the mammary and subcutaneous adipose tissues. Laryngeal structure is showing expected malleability. The days blurred into a cycle of pain, medication-induced sleep, and startling new realities. I'd wake up and my hair, which had been cropped short, would feel longer, brushing against my neck. My fingers, once thick and capable, grew thinner, more tapered. I would spend hours just staring at them, flexing them, trying to reconcile their new delicate shape with the memory of the hands that had signed the contract. But the physical metamorphosis was only one front of the war. The other was being waged inside my mind, my constant companion. Apart from Emma's disembodied voice, was Dr. Lyra, the ship's therapeutic AI. Lyra's voice was a perfectly modulated alto designed for calm and reassurance, but her purpose was invasion. "Good morning." "John," she would say, her voice echoing softly in my pod. "Today, we will be focusing on Dr. Vance's motor skills. Please integrate with the neural interface." The virtual reality simulations were my personal hell. When I closed my eyes, I was no longer in the medical bay. I was on Mars. Standing in Jade Vance's penthouse apartment overlooking the sprawling Valles Marineris. But it wasn't my body standing there. It was hers. The first time Lyra dropped me into the simulation, The sensory disconnect was so violent it made me physically sick. I looked down and saw long, toned legs, felt the phantom sensation of silk against my skin from a dress I wasn't wearing, and saw those slender, unfamiliar hands at my sides. I tried to walk, but my center of gravity was all wrong. I stumbled, lurching like a broken puppet. "Your gait is incorrect. John," Lyra's voice chided gently. "Dr. Vance moves with purpose. Her hips are aligned with her stride. Observe the overlay." A translucent, glowing image of Jade would superimpose over my virtual form, guiding my limbs, forcing my body into her posture, her rhythm. I was learning to walk again, but in a body that felt like a borrowed, ill-fitting suit. I learned how she held a stylus, the specific, elegant way she brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, the subtle tilt of her head when she was listening intently. These were not just mannerisms. They were pieces of a soul being grafted onto mine. John's memories fought back. In the darkness of my pod, I dream of the desert, of the grit of sand under my fingernails, the satisfying heft of a wrench in my hand. I dream of my father teaching me to weld, the smell of ozone and hot metal. Then I'd wake up, and the first thing I would feel was the softness of my own skin, the strange new curves of my own hips, and the despair would be a cold, hard knot in my stomach. "I am not her!" I screamed at the ceiling one day, my voice cracking. A pathetic, wavering sound that was already losing its familiar masculine timbre. "Your resistance is a natural part of the integration process," Lyra's voice replied, maddeningly calm. "Denial is the first stage. Shall we proceed with Dr. Vance's keynote address from the Terraforming Summit of 47? There were moments, however, that were even more disturbing than the resistance. Moments of surrender, late in the 5th month, during a VR session. I was practicing her walk along a simulation of the city's skywalk. For a fleeting moment, the frustration fell away. I stopped fighting the overlay and just moved. My body swayed with a natural, fluid grace I'd never known. I felt the phantom wind on my phantom face, looked out at the magnificent, impossible city spread below, and for a terrifying second, I felt a surge of pride, her pride, a sense of ownership over this creation. It was a glimpse of the freedom that came with not being John Corbin anymore, and it horrified me more than the pain. The most profound shock came around the 7th month. A dull, persistent ache in my chest had been growing for weeks. Emma had been clinical about it. Mammary tissue development is proceeding as expected, but data points and medical terms couldn't prepare me for the reality. One morning, I woke and, through the thin fabric of the medical gown, I saw the undeniable swell of breasts on my chest. My hands flew to them, and the touch was electric. They were sensitive, alien. They were mine. I scrambled out of the bed and stood before the reflective chrome panel on the wall, my makeshift mirror. I ripped the gown off. The man in the reflection was gone. In his place stood a stranger, a slender, androgynous figure with wide hips, soft skin, and the distinct, irrefutable shape of a woman's chest. My face was still in flux, the jawline softened, the cheeks fuller, but it was no longer John's face. My hair, now dark and wavy, fell to my shoulders. I saw a stranger with my eyes, and those eyes were filled with a terror so profound it felt like drowning. I touched the mirror, my new, slender fingers tracing the outline of the face staring back. It was the face of a woman I had never wanted to be, a woman I was becoming against every instinct that screamed in protest. An errant thought, a whisper from the implanted memories, slithered into my mind. You're beautiful. The 9 months ended. The ship's engines began their long, whining deceleration. Emma appeared on my monitor for the last time. The biological conversion is complete. John, or Jade, you are Jod Vance now. The pod door hissed open. The air outside smelled different, recycled but clean. I was weak, unsteady. I walked to the full-length mirror they had installed for this final reveal. There she was. Not a stranger anymore. Not an androgynous halfway point. A woman. Completely, unequivocally a woman. Tall, with a lean figure, long legs, and breasts that were small but perfectly formed. Her face was an angular, striking thing of beauty, high cheekbones, a strong but feminine jaw, and those haunting copper eyes. Jade Vance's eyes. I was naked. Not a trace of John Corbin remained. No scars from my youth. No calluses on my hands. No hint of the man I had been. He was gone. Scrubbed from existence. All that was left was this perfect, terrifying vessel. This woman in the mirror. And as I stared into her eyes, I couldn't tell if I was the ghost or if she was. When they called me Dr. Jade Vance, I realized John Corbin was truly dead. The landing on Mars was a gentle affair, a controlled descent that belied the violent upheaval of my own existence. As the ship settled into its cradle at the Valle Marineri spaceport, a new kind of terror began to bloom in my chest, cold and sharp. The incubation was over. The performance was about to begin. Emma's voice came over the comm for the last time, stripped of all its previous clinical detachment, leaving only a final, stark instruction. They're waiting for you, Dr. Vance. Remember your training. Let her memories guide you. A compartment slid open in the wall, revealing clothes. Not the simple, functional jumpsuits I had imagined, but a uniform of power. A tailored dark gray dress of a material that felt like heavy silk, a matching long coat, and a pair of low-heeled boots that still looked impossibly high to me. There was also a small case containing cosmetics and a lightweight biological respirator mask. Dressing was a surreal experience. The fabric of the dress slithered over my skin, which was still so new, so sensitive. It clung to curves I was intellectually aware of, but hadn't emotionally accepted. The dress zipped up the back, and for a panicked moment, I fumbled with it, my fingers clumsy. Then, like a switch being flipped, an echo of muscle memory took over. My hands moved with an unthinking grace, finding the zipper and pulling it up in one smooth motion. It was Jod's memory, a simple, practiced movement she had performed 1,000 times. John Corbin was the passenger now. She was driving. Walking in the boots was another test. In the VR simulations, I had practiced endlessly, but the sensation of my actual body weight balanced on a raised heel was unnerving. I took a tentative step, then another. Again. Her instinct has surfaced. My posture corrected itself, shoulders back, core engaged, a slight sway in my hips to maintain balance. I was walking like her. I was moving like her. The final piece was the mask. It was a delicate, translucent thing that molded to the lower half of my face, filtering the thin Martian atmosphere. Looking in the mirror, I saw her, Dr. Jade Vance, High Steward of Mars, returned from the dead. The mask obscured my mouth, leaving only those commanding copper eyes. Perhaps, I thought, that was for the best. The ramp lowered with a deep hum, bathing the docking bay in the harsh, artificial lights of the spaceport, and then I heard a sound I hadn't heard in nearly a year. A crowd, a roar of applause, of cheers, of 1,000 voices chanting one name, her name. Vance, Vance, Vance. I stepped out, and the wall of noise hit me like a physical force. The entire arrivals hall was packed with people, colonists, engineers, politicians, all of them looking at me with a mixture of awe, relief, and adoration. They weren't cheering for me. They were cheering for a symbol, a hero they thought they had lost. My heart, her heart pounded in my chest. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to paralyze me. What do I do? What do I say? And then, a memory surfaced, unbidden, Jod, standing on a stage, accepting an award, the feeling of the lights on her face, the sound of the crowd, the precise, calibrated smile she offered. My arm lifted, my hand moving in a slow, deliberate wave. It was her gesture, perfectly executed. The crowd roared even louder. I was a puppet, and her ghost was pulling the strings masterfully. 2 figures pushed through the throng, flanked by security, a young girl with Chade's copper eyes and dark, wavy hair, and a man with a tired, handsome face and a look of profound, aching hope. Liren, Jade's husband, and Mira, her daughter. My breath hitched. The simulations had prepared me for this, shown me countless images and recordings, but reality was a punch to the gut. The girl, Mira, broke free from her father's grasp and ran towards me, her face a mess of tears and relief. "Mom," she cried, throwing her arms around my legs and hugging me tight. Every muscle in my body tensed. John Corbin had no idea how to react. I was an engineer, a recluse, a failure. I knew about stress tolerances and thrust vectors, not the embrace of a child who believed I was her mother. But Jade knew. A wave of emotion washed over me, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. It was an overwhelming, fiercely protective love, a deep, primal ache of affection. It was her love for her daughter. My arms moved on their own, wrapping around the small, trembling girl, pulling her close. I could feel her sobbing into the fabric of my coat. "I'm here. Baby," I heard myself whisper. And the voice that came out was not John's pathetic croak or Lyra's synthesized alto. It was a woman's voice, warm, melodic, and trembling with emotion. It was Jade's voice, my voice. "I'm here. I'm okay." I looked up and met Liren's gaze. He stood a few feet away, his expression a complex tapestry of relief, love, and something else. A flicker of deep, unsettling doubt. His eyes weren't just looking at the woman he loved. They were searching, probing, looking for something behind the mask of her face. He saw a stranger wearing his wife's skin. He stepped forward and placed a hand on my arm. His touch was hesitant, gentle. "Jade," he breathed, his voice thick with unshed tears. We thought you were gone." "I'm not easy to get rid of," I replied. and the words came with a small, tired smile that felt startlingly natural. It was one of her stock phrases, a piece of pre-programmed dialogue that fit the moment perfectly. The rest of the arrival was a blur of handshakes, formal greetings from colony officials, and the constant roar of the crowd. I moved through it all on autopilot, guided by her memories. I smiled when she would have smiled, nodded when she would have nodded. John Corbin was screaming inside, a prisoner in his own skull, shouting, "This is a lie. I am a lie," but no one could hear him. Later, in the silent, sterile luxury of our penthouse apartment, the performance finally began to crack. The city of Valles Marineris spread out below the panoramic windows, a glittering jewel box in the vast, red desert. It was beautiful, an engineering marvel. A part of me, the John Corbin part, felt a surge of professional admiration. The Jade part felt the fierce, possessive pride of a creator. Mira was asleep, tucked into her bed after clinging to my side for hours. Liren had poured me a drink, a Martian whiskey that was far too smooth for my old palate. He sat across from me, watching me over the rim of his glass with those searching eyes. "You seem different," he said quietly, calmer. "I almost died." "Liren," I said, the excuse ready on my tongue. "It changes a person." He nodded, but the doubt in his eyes didn't fade. He didn't know what was wrong, but he knew something was. He was looking for the fire, the restless energy that had defined his wife, and he was finding a carefully constructed facade instead. After he had gone to bed, exhausted by the emotional turmoil, I found myself in the bathroom. It was a large, opulent space of white marble and polished chrome. I stared at my reflection, this time without the mask. Jade Vance stared back. Her face was tired, strained, but undeniably beautiful. I reached for the cosmetics case from the spaceport, my hands moving with that same eerie, borrowed familiarity. I opened a tube of lipstick. The color was a deep, bold red. I hesitated for a moment, the tube hovering before my lips. This was a line I hadn't crossed yet, a deliberate act of artifice, of embracing the female role. Then, with a deep, shuddering breath, I applied it. The color was a vivid slash against the paleness of my skin. I put on the mascara, the liner. I styled my long, dark hair, my fingers knowing just how to create the soft, elegant waves that were her signature. I sprayed a light mist of her perfume, Martian Flora, a scent of synthetic blossoms and ozonic air. The transformation was complete. The woman in the mirror was no longer just a biological replica. She was an image, an icon. She was Dr. Jade Vance, put together, powerful, and perfect. And as I stared at her, a tremor of fear and something else, a dizzying, terrifying thrill ran through me. I looked beautiful, and for the first time, a part of me, a deep, buried part I didn't want to acknowledge, didn't hate it. I wanted to scream, to smash the mirror and claw this beautiful face off until the ghost of John Corbin could be seen underneath. But I just stood there, trembling, trapped behind the eyes of a dead woman. I dreamed of her, and when I woke, I still wore her face. The next few weeks were a disorienting plunge into Jade's life. Stepping into her role as High Steward of Valles Marineris was like diving into the deep end of an ocean I didn't know how to swim in. I was drowning in meetings, policy documents, and public appearances, kept afloat only by the life raft of her memories. When a sub-governor asked about the aqueduct project in the Southern Dome, Jade's knowledge of hydrostatic pressure and flow rates surfaced, and I delivered a coherent, insightful answer that satisfied him completely. When a journalist questioned me about the timeline for Project Pangu, her ambition and carefully rehearsed PR statements flowed from my lips. I was a very convincing ghost. But the real haunting happened at night. My dreams became a battleground. John Corbin's memories of dust and failure clashed with Jade's vibrant, arrogant recollections of success and power. I'd fall asleep seeing the Arizona sky and wake up with the phantom taste of champagne in my mouth from a celebration gala I'd never attended. More disturbingly, new memories began to surface fragmented, chaotic, and tinged with fear. They weren't the curated memories Lyra had installed. These felt raw, unprocessed. I saw flashes of a clandestine meeting, the faces of Viridian executives shadowed and grim. I heard whispers of unacceptable risks and containment protocols related to Project Pangu. I saw a data file, encrypted and sealed, its contents a mystery that pulsed with a sense of dread. And then I started dreaming of her death. Not the clean, official story of a shuttle accident, but something violent and terrifying. The jolt of a weapon firing, the cold, sterile interior of a cargo bay, a voice, distorted and menacing. I would wake up gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs, the residual terror clinging to me like a shroud. These weren't my fears. They were hers. The sessions with Dr. Lyra were now mandatory, conducted remotely from a terminal in my office. They were no longer about training, but about maintenance. Your biosignature is stable. Jade, the AI's calm voice would say. Your neurological patterns are integrating well within expected parameters. Are you experiencing any anomalies? I never told her about the dreams. I never told her about the growing sense that Jade hadn't just died, she'd been silenced. One evening, during a particularly stressful session where Lyra was trying to recalibrate my emotional responses to be more in line with Jade's pre-disappearance psychological profile, something new happened. As the VR simulation constructed Jade's office around me, a whisper echoed in the virtual space. A voice that was both mine and not mine. He thinks he's living for me. The voice whispered. It was Jade's voice, but not the confident public persona. This was the voice of her private thoughts, her soul. But he's here to finish my mission. The simulation flickered and died. A minor glitch in the memory stream. Lyra announced smoothly, "Please, disregard." But I couldn't disregard it. It was the first time I felt like she wasn't just a collection of memories I was wearing, but a conscious presence, a ghost in my machine. The line between John Corbin and Jade Vance was beginning to dissolve. I didn't know where my thoughts ended and hers began. Was this fear mine? Or hers? Was this determination to uncover the truth about Project Pangu a product of John's engineering curiosity, or Jade's dying will? This fragmentation of my identity came to a head one night in front of the bathroom mirror. I had just come from a tense dinner with Lyran, the space between us filled with his unspoken questions and my well-rehearsed lies. I felt like a fraud. A monster wearing his wife's face. I scrubbed the makeup from one side of my face, leaving the other pristine. I stared at the bizarre reflection. One half was Jade Vance, the artfully shaped eyebrow, the touch of liner, the crimson lip. the face of a corporate icon. The other half was the raw material underneath a woman's face. Yes, but pale, bare, and haunted by the ghost of a man. A perfect, terrifying metaphor for my existence. Half Jade, half John. Wholly neither. A soft chime at my door broke the trance. It was Emma. She had been assigned to the colony's medical staff. A constant, quiet presence on the periphery of my new life. "A mandatory checkup," she said, her expression as unreadable as ever. But tonight, there was a flicker of something else in her eyes. Pity, concern. She ran the usual diagnostics, her touch professional and impersonal, as she worked. I watched her face. She was young, brilliant, and trapped in this conspiracy just as surely as I was.
"Why me?"
"Emma," I asked, the question breaking the clinical silence. There must have been other engineers, people who looked more like her to begin with. Emma finished her scan and set the device down. She hesitated, looking at the closed door. Before her gaze met mine, the professional mask finally slipped. "There were others," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "6 candidates before you. The process, the psychological schism was too great. Their minds shattered. They tried to integrate Jade's consciousness, and it destroyed them. So why did I survive, I asked, my blood running cold? Because you weren't just a replacement," she said, her eyes filled with a new, startling intensity. "You were a key. Jade's DNA was the foundation, but they needed something else. A specific genetic marker from a compatible donor. Something they called the primal sequence. It allows for a more stable neural imprint. Your genome was a 1 in a billion match. They didn't just rebuild you as Jade. They grew this body from a blend of her DNA and yours. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. This body wasn't just a costume. It was a fusion. Part her, part me. No wonder the line was blurring. There was no line. We had been woven together at the most fundamental level. Viridian needs Project Pangu to work," she continued, her voice urgent. "Hushed. They believe it will allow them to engineer life, to rewrite the very fabric of an ecosystem. Jade found something in the data, something she thought was dangerous. She was going to expose it." Emma looked at me, and for the first time, I saw her not as my jailer, but as a fellow prisoner. They didn't just replace her. God. They silenced her. And they created you, the perfect, controllable vessel, to see her work through to their conclusion. In that moment, an odd sense of clarity cut through my confusion. The conflict within me, John's guilt versus Jade's ambition, suddenly seemed irrelevant. We were both victims of the same machine. A strange, unexpected bond formed between me and the woman whose life I had stolen, a bond of shared purpose. And looking at Emma, seeing the fear and defiance in her eyes, I realized I had found my first ally. A new feeling began to take root in the wreckage of my identity. Not acceptance. Not yet. But resolve. John Corbin had wanted to atone. Jade Vance had wanted to stop Viridian. Perhaps, I thought. Those two goals were not so different after all. If they made me to replace her, then I will live as she would have wanted. The revelation that I was not merely a copy, but a hybrid, a fusion of John's genetic code and Jade's blueprint changed everything. The war inside my head began to subside. replaced by a fragile, tentative truce. It was no longer a matter of John versus Jade. It was a synthesis. John's analytical mind, his guilt-driven need for redemption, began to work in concert with Jade's intimate knowledge of Viridian, her charisma, and her fierce, protective love for Mars. The ghost in my machine wasn't an enemy anymore. She was my partner. My first act was to trust Emma. Together, in the dead of night, we began to dig, using Jade's high-level access codes, which were biometrically linked to my hour body. We delved into Viridian's most heavily encrypted servers. The fragmented memories I'd been experiencing acted as a guide, leading us down digital rabbit holes and past firewalls that Jade herself had designed. We found what she had found. Project Pangu wasn't just a terraforming initiative, it was a biological weapon. Viridian had discovered a extremophilic microbial life form deep beneath the Martian ice caps. They weren't trying to seed Mars with Earth life. They were trying to weaponize this native Martian biology, creating a programmable organism capable of deconstructing any ecosystem and rebuilding it to their exact specifications. It was the ultimate power, the ability to hold a planet's biosphere for ransom. Jade hadn't just stumbled upon a corporate conspiracy. She had discovered a plan that threatened the future of 2 worlds. Her accident had been a corporate execution. The knowledge settled in my gut like a block of ice. This was bigger than John Corbin's failure or Jade Vance's legacy. This was about stopping a catastrophe. Jade's memories provided more than just technical data. They provided a map of her allies. Lysandra, the fiery head of the colony's agricultural dome, who always suspected Viridian was cutting corners. Arya, a reclusive data scientist who had been Jade's protege and closest confidant. One by one, I sought them out. It was a delicate, dangerous dance. I couldn't just walk in and say, "Hello, I'm a genetically engineered replacement for your dead friend, and I'm carrying her memories." I had to be Jade. I used her history with them, referencing private conversations and shared jokes that only the real Jade could have known. I watched the initial suspicion in their eyes melt away, replaced by the dawning, relieved belief that their friend had truly, miraculously returned. Each successful deception was a victory that felt like a betrayal. Another shovel of earth on John Corbin's grave. With Emma, Lysandra, and Arya, we formed a silent rebellion, a conspiracy of 4 women operating in the heart of the system we intended to destroy. Arya sifted through the data we uncovered, packaging it into an undeniable exposé. Lysandra prepared the agricultural domes for a potential lockdown, securing the colony's food and water supply against Viridian's retaliation. Emma, using her medical access, prepared for the fallout, while I became the public face, the leader. The annual Martian Summit was our deadline. It was a major media event, broadcast live to Earth, with Viridian's top executives, including Helen Frost, in attendance. It was the biggest stage imaginable, and we were going to hijack it. The day of the summit, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Liren helped me with the clasp on a simple, elegant silver necklace. He still had that searching look in his eyes, but it was softer now, tinged with a reluctant acceptance. He saw the fire returning, the purpose, and though he didn't understand its source, he was relieved to see the woman he loved acting like herself again. The irony was a bitter pill. I was most like Jade now that I had fully embraced being a fusion of her and John. As I stood backstage, waiting for my cue to deliver the keynote address, Helen Frost approached me. Her smile was as cold and sharp as ever. "You've been performing remarkably well, Doctor," she said, her voice a low murmur. "Exceeding all expectations. A testament to our technology." "I'm just picking up where I left off," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Precisely," she said. "See to it that you continue. The board is very pleased with the progress on Pangu. She thought I was her puppet, her greatest creation. She had no idea the ghost in the machine had its own agenda." I walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The lights were blinding, the faces in the crowd a blur. I stepped up to the podium, my hands resting on its smooth, cool surface. I took a deep breath, the filtered air of the respirator tasting of ozone. I could feel John's stage fright, his fear of failure, warring with Jade's commanding presence. I let her win. I began my speech, using the sanitized, corporate-approved script. I spoke of progress, of the future, of the partnership between Viridian and the people of Mars. I saw Helen Frost in the front row, nodding in satisfaction. Then, at Arya's signal, a subtle green light on the teleprompter that only I could see, I went off script. "But the future Viridian is selling you is a lie." A hush fell over the great hall. Helen Frost's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of cold fury. "Project Pangu is not about creating life," I declared, my voice ringing with a conviction that was entirely my own. "It's about controlling it. It's a weapon, designed to hold worlds hostage." On the massive screen behind me, Arya's work flashed to life. Encrypted files, damning internal memos, simulations of the weaponized microbe in action, all of it laid bare for the entire solar system to see. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. "We came to Mars to build a new world, not to create a new weapon." My voice soared, filled with a passion I didn't know I possessed. "We cannot hope to terraform this planet by killing the very soul of it." Chaos erupted. Viridian's security moved towards the stage, but the colony's own peacekeepers, loyal to Jade, moved to intercept them. Helen Frost was on her feet, her face a thunderous mask. She lunged toward the stage stairs, her eyes locking with mine. In that moment of confrontation, as our gazes met across the panicked hall, the last vestiges of John Corbin's fear and doubt burned away. I wasn't an imposter. I wasn't a replacement. I was a reckoning. She met me at the side of the stage, her voice a venomous hiss. "You are nothing." "A copy. I will have you decommissioned." I looked down at this woman who had orchestrated my erasure and Jade's murder, and I felt nothing but a cold, hard certainty. The synthesis was complete. "I'm not John Corbin," I said, my voice quiet but unshakable. "He's gone. I am Jade Vance, the woman you murdered, and the one woman you will never, ever control. One half of the Martian sky is blue, the other half red, like the two halves of myself that have finally stopped fighting." The fallout from the summit was seismic. The broadcast of Viridian's data created a shockwave that rippled from the domed cities of Mars all the way back to the boardrooms on Earth. Viridian's stock plummeted. Their executives were recalled, and their stranglehold on the Martian colony was broken in a single, decisive blow. The people of Mars, who had once seen the corporation as their benefactor, now saw it as a would-be tyrant. The revolution was swift, and thanks to the loyalty Jade commanded, remarkably bloodless. In the chaotic weeks that followed, I found myself at the center of it all. I was no longer just the High Steward. I was a symbol of Martian independence. Delegations from every dome, from the miners in the deep shafts to the botanists in the orbital greenhouses, came to me, looking for guidance. They wanted me to lead them, to be the first president of a free Mars. It was everything Jade would have wanted. It was everything John Corbin would have run from. I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, looking out at the city I had, in a sense, saved. The thin Martian air was cold against my face. Behind me, Liren approached, placing a warm shawl over my shoulders. The gesture was comfortable, familiar. Yet the space between us was still charged with a quiet complexity. "They want to name the capital after you," he said softly. "Vance City." I shook my head. That's not what this was about. "What was it about?" "Jada," he asked, and for the first time. The question felt genuine, not an accusation. "Who are you?" I turned to face him, the red light of the rising sun painting one side of my face, the artificial blue glow of the city's dawn cycle lamps painting the other. "I am the woman you married," I said, the words tasting of truth, "and I am the man who built the machine that failed. I am both of them, and I'm finally done trying to be one or the other. In the end, I refused the presidency. Power was Jadi's drug, and a part of me still craved it. But John's cautionary tale was a ghost that walked beside me. Instead, I proposed something radical. The choice of secession. We would divide Mars not by nationhood or ideology, but by philosophy. Those who wished to continue pursuing aggressive, rapid terraforming under corporate oversight could establish the blue zones. Those who believed in a slower, more organic integration with Mars, in studying and preserving what was already here, would live in the red zones, a planet of two skies, two futures, living side by side. My proposal was adopted. I relinquished my political power, stepping down as High Steward and taking on a simple advisory role in the new Red Zone Council. My work was done. Jade's mission was complete, and John's atonement had been made. Life found a new rhythm, a quiet cadence I had never known as either of my former selves. Our family Liren, Mira, and I moved to a smaller home on the edge of the city, where the dome gave way to the raw, unfiltered red landscape. Liren, a geologist, found new passion in studying the native world we had vowed to protect. The searching doubt in his eyes was replaced by a quiet, steady love and affection not for the woman I was supposed to be, but for the person I had become. One evening, Mira and I were sitting outside on our small porch, watching the sky. The terraforming efforts in the blue zones were already having a small, visible effect. High-altitude ice crystals, seeded by their machines, refracted the light, creating a faint, azure haze on one horizon, while the other remained the deep, dusty crimson of the natural Mars. Mom, Mira asked, her small hand finding mine. Her touch no longer sent a jolt of panic through me, only a gentle, steady warmth. "Yes, baby." "Do you ever miss being Dad, John?" The question was so simple, so innocent, yet it struck at the very core of my being. For a moment, the old identities flickered, the lonely, broken man in the desert, the brilliant, ambitious woman against the sunset. They were both still there, not as warring factions, but as foundation stones. I smiled, a genuine, unforced expression that belonged to neither of them and both of them. I can still hear his voice sometimes. I told her, my gaze drifting up to the heavens. Every time the wind blows across this sky, I looked up at the magnificent, cloven sky above us. One half was the hopeful, engineered blue of a new earth. The other was the ancient, stark red of Mars. It was no longer a symbol of my inner conflict. It was a reflection of my peace. I was a bridge between two worlds, two souls, two pasts. I was not John Corbin. I was not just Jade Vance. I was simply me, a new being forged in loss and sacrifice. Finally at home under two skies,